Hello everybody, welcome back for another one of these. I've had this one in the works for a while and it was not one of the easy ones because a lot of the kaiju kinda hard to find matchups for. But I managed. Now not all of these are super thematic, but it's hard to be with some of these kaiju. And I want to stress that despite the name of this video, not literally every kaiju will get a matchup from the Godzilla franchise, because some really don't warrant it. The giant lizard, octopus, and condor are all just find a big bird, a 2-meter long lizard, and a big octopus. Any of them will work. Put fucking giant octopus against Tentacolino. Any of the unseen titans or the monsterverse as well, or even ones that like are barely seen. I know there's one that you can like see a corpse, I think, at one point. But yeah, Skylar, Methuselah, and Behemoth have been seen, and we know a bit about them. But any of the ones that we don't know about, like Tiamat or Bahamut, they're not getting on here. Neither will the Skeleturtle from the Showa era, the Servum from the Reiwa era, Shokuras from the Heisei era, MEGANULLA/MEGANULON from the Millennium era, and KUMONGA, Hanenga, and Zenbunga from Singular Point. Neither will Fairy Mothra from the Heisei era, the Skull Devil from the Monsterverse era, or other kaiju from Toho works like Mothra Leo or Ghidorah, unless they have appeared in a Godzilla film. I'm aware that Ghidorah appears in stock footage in Final Wars, but that doesn't count. So does G.I.R.A and Sandra, but they're also not going to be included. There will also be some bonus matchups that aren't directly in Godzilla products, but are very closely related or have appeared with Godzilla, or just had a matchup that I liked enough to talk about. And before we get started, I want to thank someone named Darth Tyrant for helping me with this. Not the Tyrant on this channel, different one. He's a cool guy, and he not only helped me come up with some of the matchups, but also made some of the thumbnails as well. Any thumbnail with a different template to the rest were ones made by him. So, let's go. Obviously, Godzilla vs. Gamera is already an episode of Death Battles happened, it's Godzilla's best matchup, and I just wanted to show off this thumbnail I made for it, but let's get to the first actual matchup. ANGUIRUS vs. JIGER from Gamera, or JIGER. There's a lot of Japanese names, I don't remember how it's pronounced in the Gamera film. Ancient reptilian quadrupeds who get their asses kicked in all of their appearances. ANGUIRUS even by regular people at one point. It's not much, but Gamera and Godzilla Kaiju normally work very well together, and aesthetically they're two big, 4-leg spiky fuckers. King Kong vs. George from Rampage. Giant apes that are generally friendly with humans and fight reptiles to defend them. Primarily this fits with George from the movie. Game George I don't think is terribly fitting, but it's still something of an interesting matchup. Kong's other options were Mothra, which thematically works as two giant animal kaiju worshipped as gods by an island's indigenous tribal population, who crossed over with Godzilla in the Showa era as some of his earliest opponents. But the problem there is that the most iconic things that Kong's done in fights with other kaiju that people want to see is choking them with a tree or a bone, or breaking their jaw. Both of which you can't really do against Mothra in a way that would feel terribly natural. King Kong also has Zilla, which is just King Kong vs. Godzilla but King Kong wins, and the Beast Titan from Attack on Titan, but I don't give a shit about the Beast Titan. Mothra vs. Queen SECTONIA from Kirby. Insect queens, one being a god and one wanting to be a god. Mothra doesn't have any options I like, including this one. It's just sort of neat that, you know, it's a series that won't appear again on this list. It's Kirby and giant animal. Mothra's other options were Xerneas, but I mean it works, but Xerneas is such a nothing Pokemon, and Palutena, who I don't give a shit about, and I don't think aesthetically works very well. I think you can have Palutena fight Cetrion from Mortal Kombat. King GHIDORAH vs. DEATHSAURUS from Transformers, or DEATHSAURUS, however you want to do it. Giant space aliens who look like dragons, but technically aren't, who go around destroying planets and conquering worlds while being known as emperors. DEATHSAURUS, the Emperor of Destruction, and King GHIDORAH, the Emperor of the Cosmos. King GHIDORAH had a bunch of options, but I don't like most of them. Fin Fang Foom is a thing, and he works, but I kinda like Foom vs. Dracula Carterfang from DC, because the idea of a Marvel vs. DC fight that's actually just a giant dragon battle sounds cool. There's also Deathwing from Warcraft, but that's just being dragons and he can go beat that Alduin. And if you're wondering about things like Eternidus or Bahamut, just wait, there's a reason they weren't used to regular GHIDORAH. As it stands, DEATHSAURUS is a lot more draconic in design as some of his later appearances, and while he's not as big as GHIDORAH, I think you can safely make him around half GHIDORAH's size without it being too jarring. Not only is this because DEATHSAURUS has been portrayed as massive at points, but also because GHIDORAH is generally seen fighting kaiju who are a good deal smaller than him. He is in fact twice as big as Godzilla in the Showa era. Plus, you could have DEATHSAURUS in Roa mode for a bit using his sword, but GHIDORAH regenerating his heads when they're cut off, and then DEATHSAURUS goes into beast mode and we get the big dragon fight. Genuinely my favorite GHIDORAH matchup, and I do like DEATHSAURUS. Oh yeah, there's also GHIDORAH vs. Megatron, but that has less connections, is less aesthetically pleasing, with Megatron being a guy who just becomes a gun or a tank or a jet, as opposed to a giant dragon. I know Beast Wars and RID Megatron did, but they're separate and they also don't work, and DEATHSAURUS just offers more. RODAN vs RAPTROS from War of the Monsters, giant bipedal reptilians from the Age of Dinosaurs who initially had partners but would lose them. RODAN's got very little to go on, but RAPTROS fits him in animation and that's fine enough. EBITA vs Ganim, the big crab from Space Amoeba, giant mutated crustaceans who are mind-controlled into being servants from an antagonistic force despite originating as innocent sea creatures. This one was pretty obvious. EBITA doesn't have many other options, and this is one of the ones that immediately was like, duh. There is, I guess, Tamatoa, but he can go fight Rampage and Beast Wars. That sounds way funnier and more entertaining. MINILLA vs KIKO from Son of Kong, the hideous-looking sons of Godzilla and King Kong from the Showa era that never get to grow up on screen and are friendly with humans. It feels weird, given Son of Kong is generally not considered a bad movie, and KIKO is considerably more liked than MINILLA, because I don't acknowledge the opinions of people who like MINILLA. And then MINILLA destroys KIKO. KUMONGA vs Tarantulas from Beast Wars Transformers, giant evil tarantulas that try to vore children characters. It's not a great matchup for Tarantulas, but he does offer more animation potential than Kumonga's other matchup, which is a tarantula from Tarantula! Yeah, exclamation mark right in the title. Which is a good match of Kumonga as well, there's just less you can do with it. Kamakura's versus the giant mantis from the Deadly Mantis. Giant mantises? What else is there to say? Manda vs the Amugi from D-War, giant serpentine guardian dragons based on protector dragons of Japan and Korea, who awaken in the modern day to defeat evil. This is definitely Manda's best matchup, and while D-War isn't a particularly stunning movie, it is some general giant monster being movie nonsense, and the Amugi fits very well for Manda. GOROSAURUS vs the VASTATOSAURUS Rex from King Kong, extremely large theropod dinosaurs from Skull Island who got their shit pushed in by Kong. You could argue it's a same series matchup in that GOROSAURUS originates from a King Kong film, but it's not that bad considering they're completely different canons, and GOROSAURUS is honestly more iconic for its appearance in Destroy All Monsters anyway. He could have also fought the Indominus Rex, who I think should go fight another giant monster science experiment, or Devil Dinosaur, who is a Marvel herald and GOROSAURUS doesn't deserve an L that big. BARAGON vs BARUGON from GAMERAD, ancient reptilian kaiju who are awoken and attack humanity only to be stopped by a giant protector. The two also use opposing elements, with BARAGON as a fire breather and BARUGON as an ice user, and BARAGON would later himself become a guardian kaiju, which matches with Gamera's role if they were to fight. The two also have very similar names. I like this matchup a lot actually, and the fact that both of them look really adorable is just great. VARAN vs GAPPA from GAPPA the Triphibian monster, ancient giant Triphibian kaiju. There's not much for connections, but kaiju Triphibians aren't terribly common. Triphibians being like things that can function on land, air, and water, which off the top of my head I can only really think of like waterfowl and insects, which sort of do that, but it's not like ducks are like fish underwater. But VARAN and GAPPA both fly and swim, along with fighting on the land. That's pretty cool. GABARA vs Nightmare from Five Nights at Freddy's. Dumbass monocolored monsters who exist only as nightmares within a child's mind, as bullies who didn't technically exist within the world of their series until later installments, with GABARA becoming a real kaiju in Go Godman and the Godzilla anime books, and Nightmare being real in Ultimate Custom Night. It's kind of thematic, and I hate that. It's FNAF vs Godzilla. Fuck. HEDORAH vs Legion from GAMERAD. Now I know Legion is often matched against just Doroya because they're insectoid and have multiple forms, but I think HEDORAH matches better. They're both massive space aliens that arrive to Earth and form a single giant kaiju out of a collective of smaller parts, who prove to be nearly indestructible and unstoppable monsters of their era who also happen to shoot red laser beams. Also at their tallest, there's not much of a height difference, which is cool. Gigan vs Godzilla from GAMERAD. Yeah, more GAMERAD. They're giant space aliens with blades in their bodies who shoot discs out of their enemies and are completely useless. It's kind of funny to me. There's also Gigan vs Starscream, which I made a thumbnail for because I like the Starscream render, which is them being space aliens who are cowardly, though this only really applies to Gigan's Showa incarnation. It also works, but the size difference is a bit more noticeable when Starscream's not meant to be a giant monster like DEATHSAURUS in his alt mode, and Gigan doesn't generally fight kaiju who are massively smaller than him. I also just really like Starscream vs Middleface, which is cooler. Megalon vs Zeton from Ultraman. Zeton, giant space insect cyborgs with special weaponized hands that shoot red fireballs and look very similar. They're also the ultimate weapon of the civilizations that send them out. Ultraman's not ending its appearances here, fair warning. Jet Jaguar vs Genebot from Ultraman. Is it Genebot? Senshin Mecha, who they're essentially giant superhero robots in tokusatsu kaiju stories. Best Jet Jaguar matchup by a long shot. His other option's Ultraman, who you'll see. Mechagodzilla vs MECHANI-KONG from King Kong. The Showa era mechanical replicas of Godzilla and King Kong who failed to destroy the originals twice. MECHANI-KONG just fits Showa Mechagodzilla very well in the general aesthetic and tone of the fight. I think it'd be really funny. King Caesar vs Shepherdon from Ultraman. Sacred Beast Protector Kaiju of whole civilizations who both fought the main kaiju when they were out of control, and also fought alongside them as iconic allies. They also both use crystallized energies. King Caesar also has another matchup in Daimajin from the Daimajin series, with both being guardian statues that come to life to defend people. The problem is that Daimajin's like a fifth of King Caesar's height at minimum, and also he's never fought another kaiju. Titanosaurus vs JIGER from GAMERAD. Giant aquatic monsters who fight on land despite being wholly sea creatures, one being a peaceful native of Earth, and one being an aggressive space alien. Titanosaurus has very little to go with, so there's likely some other sea creatures from Ultraman he could have fought as well, but I think these two look good, like, if they're in a fight. Bonus matchup 1! Zone Fighter vs Ultraman from the Ultra series. The classic legacy battle of the two biggest tokusatsu kaijin from TV shows, Hikaru Sakimori and Shin Hayata, who both turn into gigantic alien humanoid superheroes to fight kaiju to protect the planet, while doing silly arm movements to perform special techniques, having red shields, and a wide array of technological weaponry. This is generally one of my most wanted tokusatsu matchups in a similar vein to Decade vs Marvelous, but giant. I love this, I would love to see them fight. I know Jet Jaguar vs Ultraman is also popular, but Jet Jaguar canonically scales below Zone Fighter, because Jet Jaguar lost a one-on-one against Gigan, while Zone Fighter is the one who actually killed Gigan, and Jet Jaguar only has a spear and headlights for combat, and one laser in the games, and that's all he gets. Zone Fighter's got so much more, and yeah, Jet Jaguar can size change, but so can Zone Fighter. In every way, this is better. Biolante vs Undergrowth from Danny Phantom. Giant plants who are actually the undead spirits of the deceased, one being a benevolent one and one being a malevolent one. It's an interesting one. I like Biolante, and I think this actually kind of works with the whole ghost plant thing, which is one thing that's very unique to Biolante. There's also Chaos from the Sonic series, but that's most of them looking similar and I guess being benevolent giant monsters. And P.T. Piranha, which you can suck my dick. MECHA-KING GHIDORAH vs PREDDY-KING from Transformers Prime. Massive mechanical dragons that are recreations of long-deceased beasts or legends of whom they derive their names. MECHA-KING GHIDORAH coming from the original King Ghidorah, and PREDDY-KING from the original PREDDY-KING, who both used the original organic parts of their predecessors, with MECHA-KING GHIDORAH using Ghidorah's parts and PREDDY-KING using the original CNA. They were able to improve on their originals and succeeded where they failed. MECHA-KING GHIDORAH had more weapons than the original and actually stopped Godzilla, while PREDDY-KING had developed transformation when the original didn't and succeeded as the new Predacon leader. I should note that when I say the original PREDDY-KING, I don't mean the G1 one, I mean the original PREDDY-KING from the aligned continuity. This is a pretty cool matchup, and similar to DEATHSAURUS, you can size up PREDDY-KING to not look too small against his foe, especially because PREDDY-KING is consistently portrayed as this massive beast in his dragon mode, despite his robot mode being like a head taller than Megatron. Weird, but it's a cool match. Batra vs Beerus from Dragon Ball. Animal gods of destruction that are a necessary part of the world, who are willing to destroy all of humanity but were stopped, and are kept in check by an angelic entity. The two also slept for a long ass time prior to being reawakened for their stories, and went right back to their roles of destruction. It's generally thematic. I don't like that, but Batra is awesome and so is Beerus, so it's okay. I just don't know how this would work as a fight. But I guess unlike a lot of regular people versus kaiju things, Beerus kind of works because he's got a lot of long-range key techniques. And I guess like with Batra, he does fight a lot like in the air clashing with Mothra, so the fact that he's flying, which normally would work against the benefit of fighting a grounded opponent, actually works well because Beerus also flies, so I guess I can see this working. Super Mechagodzilla vs Metal Overlord from Sonic the Hedgehog. Giant metal copies of Godzilla and Sonic who combine with aircraft to achieve their strongest forms who got their shit beat anyway. I think it's cool, though admittedly Metal Overlord fits with Kiryu better, but I think it's fine. Space Godzilla vs Ultraman Belial from Ultraman. The dark reflections of Godzilla and Ultraman who were empowered and corrupted on a genetic level by extraterrestrial forces who are the ultimate dark lords of their verse. I like this matchup a lot, it's the best matchup for both, it's really cool, it's my favorite version of any Godzilla vs Ultraman themed fight, in the sense of like a Godzilla vs a Ultraman. Mogura vs Nemesis Prime from Transformers Prime. Robots who were originally space aliens, now rebuilt from the remains of destroyed robots by humans to fulfill their purposes of destroying their protagonists, who failed anyway, piloted by kinda crazy people. It's fine, I guess. Nemesis Prime is a bit small to fight Mogura, but Mogura's other options were just Labyrinth Tag from Yu-Gi-Oh!, and that really works against the Land Mogura, which leaves out the Star Falcon in combined form. Destoroyah vs Iris from Gamera. The demonic anti-Godzilla and anti-Gameras whose origins are related to the ending events of the first movie of their timeline, and the adverse effects of killing those films' main threats. They both steal DNA to evolve and adapt themselves further, they both embody death narratively and thematically, they show higher levels of sadism and cruelty than most other kaiju in this series and live primarily for the sake of killing others, have weak points in their chest, and also embody a form of hubris. Destoroyah embodying the hubris of humanity creating a device more dangerous than Godzilla to kill Godzilla despite creating dangerous weapons being the origin of Godzilla in the first place, and Iris embodying the hubris of the Atlanteans continuously resorting to creating more dangerous life forms to deal with their previous dangerous life forms. as well as the hubris of Gamera considering himself the guide in the world only to not care for the lives of individual humans and allowing the death of Ayano's family. Both were also forced into adapting their final forms due to the intervention and attacks from the Japanese military and other kaiju, with their whole reason for adapting coming from the actions of humanity, as Ayano retrieving Iris' egg is what caused him to grow, and the scientists of Japan retrieving the mutated crustaceans from the seabed being only allowed destroyer to evolve. This is my most wanted matchup for Death Battle, period. It involves two of my favorite kaiju from these series, it's very thematic, and it has plenty of animation potential were it done in 3D, including stuff I couldn't do in my own take on it. With Iris' tentacles having a ton of things you can do, and what I want the most, a scene of Destroyer's micro-oxygen cells within Iris' body consuming his cells, after he absorbs Destroyer's DNA. Love it, love it, love it. Here's a Saidu thumbnail. Godzilla Jr. vs Todo from Gamera, the near-identical sons of Godzilla and Gamera who took on their mantle after their father's dramatic deaths, and have actually fought against kaiju. I like these two a lot more compared to Minilla. I think this is Jr.'s best fight easily. Orga vs Gel-Worm from Ultraman. Gel-Worm, I don't know, I don't care. Alien monsters who lived in large meteoric structures before copying the DNA of Godzilla and Ultraman to evolve in ways to fight them. Though with Gel-Worm it straight up turned into Ultraman Cosmos, while Orga never finished his transformation into a Godzilla, but it's cool, right? Mecha-Garus vs Meruem from Hunter x Hunter. Insect Queen and Insect King who are significantly more powerful than any of their kind and consume the energy of others to empower themselves and develop new abilities, including red orbs that they shoot. Meruem also apparently was kind of cruel and vicious like Mecha-Garus earlier on in the story. I do like this matchup, but they would have a lot of trouble actually doing it as a fight, because Mecha-Garus as a kaiju is most notable for being really small for her species, or like for kaiju, which means with Meruem it'd be kind of hard. I don't know, Meruem should just stick with cars. GMK King Ghidorah vs the Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon from Yu-Gi-Oh! Ancient spirits of the past who are guardians of humanity and rule the skies, formed from a fusion of spirits. Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon being 3 Blue Eyes, and King Ghidorah being the spirits of GHIDORAH and MOTHRA, with Baragon spirit later helping out. And of course, they're giant 3-headed dragons. Yeah, GMK Ghidorah is different enough from the normal Ghidorah, so much that he can have his own matchup that's completely different in vibe and thematics. And Blue Eyes is awesome, so I'm okay with this. In fact, GMK Ghidorah is awesome too. In fact, GMK is a great movie, go watch it. Kiryu vs the Dragonzord from Mighty Morphin Power Rangers already an episode, moving on. Camoevis vs the Giant Turtle from the Bermuda Depths. Giant mutated turtles who were generally kind and innocent before becoming monsters. Nobody watched the Bermuda Depths. I haven't even watched it. Kaiser Ghidorah vs YAMATA-NO-OROCHI from Orochi, the 8-headed dragon. Giant quadrupedal, multi-headed dragons are started in humanoid forms before turning into dragon kaiju to become beasts of destruction. Yeah, Orochi fits Kaiser more than King Ghidorah as well, so that's another King Ghidorah match I've cut by a separate Ghidorah. Controller X vs Agent Smith from The Matrix. I know Controller X is not a kaiju, but shut the fuck up. Comically over-the-top villains who overcame the controller, the ones that controlled them. And, more importantly, Final Wars blatantly rips off The Matrix in a ton of ways, and X is the Smith counterpart. It sounds like it'd be really fucking fun with like their crazy martial arts skills and over-the-top acting, and you could have like an army of Agent Smiths versus Controller X's army of kaiju. Like, that just sounds hilarious to see Zilla fight off like an army of tiny people. But more importantly, I want the giant Agent Smith made of Agent Smiths from the video game fighting against Gigan and then Kaiser Ghidorah. It just sounds fucking hilarious. Zilla vs the T-Rex Battlezord from the 2017 Power Rangers reboot film. American-designed rebooted theropod versions of classic Japanese designs, that also sadly didn't originate from great movies, but that's secondary. Other than Zilla's other option was King Kong, and that doesn't work for me. JIGER vs the Space Amoeba from Space Amoeba. Giant blue single-celled organisms from Toho that attempted to invade Earth and are very hard to kill. Look, JIGER had to show up in the opening sequence of the first anime film. I was obligated to find a fight for him. It was between the Space Amoeba from Space Amoeba and the Space Amoeba from Star Trek. Just get the two Space Amoebas to fight. JIGER vs Gyaos from Gamera. Bioengineered super lifeforms that were created for the usage of the Nearly Kanai and the Atlanteans, but eventually caused their downfall. Later on, human actions caused them to reawaken in the modern day where they fought a kaiju appointed the guardian of the world. It's generally one of my favorite Gamera vs Godzilla matchups, even if JIGER is primarily from Rebirth of Mothra 2, but I like it because you can have JIGER take the advantage when on the water, Gyaos take the advantage in the air, and then have the fight end with both on land when they're on even footing. Just sounds cool. Mecha-Godzilla City vs Trypticon from Transformers. Giant mechanical theropod dinosaurs who redefine what it means to be massive because they turn into cities. I'd love this matchup more if Mecha-Godzilla City ever did anything. Anime King Ghidorah vs Bahamut from Final Fantasy. All-powerful astral dragon deities from space summoned to wreak havoc and destroy worlds by normal people. I think this is the more fitting Ghidorah matchup for Bahamut, isn't it? Like, you can have Bahamut summoned and then some other dickhead summons Anime King Ghidorah to fight him. I'm just picturing now, like, regular Bahamut fighting off the noodles, but then he goes to, like, a stronger Bahamut form and charges through the black hole to fight the true form of Ghidorah. That just sounds so cool. The Mutos versus Leatherback and Otachi from Pacific Rim. Surprisingly, not many Pacific Rim matchups I know, but here's one. Two pairs of kaiju that appear at the same time, only to be beaten by a single opponent. One being a larger and bulkier kaiju with electromagnetic powers, and the other being a smaller, faster kaiju with the ability to fly. Both of them are also the same species, Leatherback and Otachi being clothes, and the Mutos being the same species. I think it's cool. There's not many team fights you can get in kaiju matchups, so I'll take it. Shin Godzilla vs. Eva Unit 1 from Neon Genesis Evangelion. This thumbnail was made by Darth Tyrant even if it doesn't use the same template as his earlier ones. Hideaki Anno's Children. I dislike Godzilla vs. Eva Unit 1 normally, but I think this one works better. Solunga vs. Rajang from Monster Hunter. No one told me how to pronounce that name, so I'm just gonna go with that. Big Electric Apes. It's like Rajang vs. Blanca, but the two are about the same size now, so it's actually better. Doug vs. Reptile Loki from the MCU. This is a joke, but I love it. The Warbat vs. the Baraki from D-War. Giant aggressive flying cobra serpents. That's all they are. It's cool, matches aesthetically, done. Monster vs. Mechagodzilla vs. Galvatron from Transformers Age of Extinction. Giant silver robots built by humans designed to emulate the appearances of Godzilla and Optimus Prime, while using parts from King Ghidorah and Megatron, who would take control of these new bodies to become antagonists independent of their original human designs and would body their rivals. It's about the best you can get for this Mechagodzilla, but there is a noticeable size problem, I'm aware. Now for a few bonus matchups. These are kaiju that generally don't have a whole lot to use at all, because none of them have been in a fight. And I know we had Doug earlier, but that was a joke, and at least the Warbats actually fought someone. Let's go. Bagan vs. the Mega Kaiju from Pacific Rim. Massive kaiju amongst the bulkiest of their franchises, with one version of Bagan even being a fusion of 3 smaller kaiju like the Mega Kaiju is. It's fine, and Bagan does have a game and a Japanese ride, so this matchup's technically doable. Behemoth vs. Gammoth from Monster Hunter. Giant mammoth looking fellas, that's all. The unnamed multi-legged kaiju versus the unnamed tentacle kaiju from GAMERAD. This is another joke, but they're unnamed kaiju who we only ever saw in shorts and not in any proper films. Skylar vs. Kumonga, the sticky string kaiju from Yu-Gi-Oh! Big spiders who are likely inspired by Kumonga. Methuselah vs. the Adamant Tortoise from Final Fantasy 15. Big walking mountain fellas. Yeah, sadly Methuselah's actually had less kaiju fights than these two. And finally, the only kaiju matchup that has not only never been in a Godzilla product, but has never shared the screen with him like Zone Fighter has. Ghidorah vs. Eternatus. Giant space dragons that came to Earth only to be beaten down by protective guardians and sealed away, only to reawaken in the future and face against those guardians once more. Once again, King Ghidorah is not the Ghidorah that fits Eternatus the best. Please, Ghidorah vs. Eternatus. Ghidorah is so fucking cool. And there you go, a matchup for all worthwhile kaiju in the Godzilla franchise. Hope you all enjoyed. Thanks again to Darth Tyrant for helping me out with this. Hope you all have a good one.